Critics have often questioned, as an attack on the validity of the Bible, as to why Psalm 137 verse 9 says, "Happy shall he be, that taketh and dasheth thy little ones against the stones." You've got to remember that it's important to read within the context of a chapter that a certain verse is in. If you had done likewise with this, you'd find that it went for a specific type of children, not having anything to do with children of today. Does the Bible teach that it is okay to kill children? Absolutely not. But we must ask what this writer was talking about, and why he said it. Psalm 137 is talking about the Babylonian captivity. The psalmist writer speaks of the people of the Lord being persecuted by dangerous Babylonian tyrants, a promise to remember Jerusalem, and a curse of justice against the captors and persecutors. The writer of this verse, too, was in exile, and had likely witnessed the atrocities committed against his people, babies included. In the revenge style that was common at the time, he wishes the same back at his enemy, as a description of their utter destruction. Nowhere once does it say that the Lord approved of the psalmist's saying. Just because it is recorded that the psalmist wrote the imprecation, doesn't mean it was approved by God. It was never a condemnation. Just a historical statement, and documentation and report. It is worth noting that the Old Testament records many such atrocities. The fact is that God allowed people to have their way with their sinful desires, and he worked within their culture, even as he does now, as he permits all kinds of bad things to happen. Nevertheless, God introduced what is called the apodictic law in Exodus 21. An eye for an eye and a tooth for a tooth. The apodictic law was instituted to prevent the increase of bloody revenges, a practice where revenge would escalate out of control between two parties. And while the Jews were captive in Babylon, their God-given apodictic law was borrowed by slick copycats, such as the false teacher Zoroaster. Since the hearts of the fallen are so wicked, and the harsh environment and culture produce difficulties for survival, the Lord has a few options to counter their proclivity towards evil. He can run roughshod over their free will, and force everyone to obey him, or he could wipe them all out. He had already done this with Noah's flood. I'm a descendant of Noah, as are you. Science confirms it, but that's another long story. Or the Lord could work within the situation at hand. In the case of this psalm, and its Babylonian captivity context, God chose to work with people and through them, instead of violating the freedom he had given them, and forcing them to act in a manner that he instructs. Therefore, the psalmist is expressing his curse against Babylon, a natural response to what his people have already suffered. And we must remember that God, now in the New Testament, has given us this specific command. It was even so back then, but it was coming. Romans 12:19 says, "Dearly beloved, avenge not yourselves, but rather give place unto wrath, for it is written, Vengeance is mine, I will repay, saith the Lord." Also, the critics need to provide an acceptable objective moral standard by which they can criticize biblical morality. It is one thing to complain. It is another to offer a justification for the validity of the complaint. By what right, and by what objective ethical standard do the critics offer moral condemnation against biblical morals? Why not complain against corrupt humanist morals? This is a serious question that, if not answered by the critics, renders the critics' complaints moot. After all, you must first have a standard against which to measure good and bad, and without a standard, no complaints can be legitimately offered. Thank you for watching. P.S. Woe unto them that call evil, good, and good, evil.